Hello, hello, hello. I am here with somebody who has become, I'd say, one of my favorite people. And again, somebody I've never met in the flesh over this pandemic, which feels so strange. But someone whose work I deeply admire and whose thoughts are just eloquent beyond, and who is innovating in a way that I aspire to create within this industry, and somebody who is truly what I feel is reimagining the way in which we tell stories and the way in which we all can show up to tell those stories. Anyway, without further ado, one of my favorite people, Jaz Hall. Hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
I know I said
Oh
I
my
wouldn't give you like a
gosh.
full introduction, but like, I guess I
I
did.
know. I was like, so much to live to. Eloquent beyond.
I mean, it's true. I mean, it's real.
Well,
Jaz has
thank
been with
you.
EAC, yeah, since the beginning. And it was because we slid into your DMs, I think, being like, well, I think that's how, right? We slid into your DMs being like, we've kind of stalked you and found you and think you're really dope. You don't know us, but
That's
like,
literally what happened. But I'm always down for an artistic DM sliding. I think
yeah.
that's probably the only one that's copacetic.
Yeah, I know. Otherwise, we need to have a conversation about boundaries. Well, before we kind of jump on in, tell the listener who you are today, or what they maybe would like to know, or you think they need to know about you in this moment.
For sure. Thank you. Also, thank you for saying who you are today. I think that like ourselves are like ever evolving
Yeah,
entities. And so we should be able to show up as who we are in the present moment and
yeah.
then keep moving forward. But hey, folks, I'm Jaz Hall. My pronouns are they, them. Gosh, I used to have a whole spiel and think so many things have changed in recent times
Yeah.
that it's completely different. I am currently a freelance artist. I am a director, producer. I work in casting, a performer. So formerly multi-hyphenate, currently interdisciplinary, I think is the language
Mhm.
I'm using moving forward. Yeah, I care about art and marginalized and minority groups and art by those groups and building community. I also have a collective, artistic collective for queer independent artists of color called Womb, the Creation Space, which was doing some producing during the pandemic of just like giving folks a platform to like do shows in their living rooms because we're doing them anyway. So why not have an
Yeah.
audience who can tip you? And currently, I am at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where I am assistant directing and understudying Once on This Island, which will run for the full season.
So
Um,
great.
yeah, oh my gosh, it's been amazing. We're a month in, and they're going swimmingly.
Yes. See, y'all, this is, when people say you can't do it all, I mean, like, what does that even mean? Because, like, just having your foot in all of these little pockets, I would imagine, just inspires and enhances the work that you do in all the spaces. It's just an expansion rather than a limitation. And it's just a different way of thinking about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting too, because I come across folks, especially from like the generation prior to mine, who have also dabbled in this, but I find that other folks are so quick to try to label them as like the person they met them
Mm,
as opposed to like allowing that person to introduce themselves and say, these are the things I do, these are the things I'm interested in. So I'm really excited for like in the arts moving forward that that's kind of the way we begin to engage and meet people. So
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I will claim all of the titles of work that I do, and imposter syndrome be damned.
Yeah. Well, I love that as a transition. Let's talk about, I mean, for you, how do you navigate that for yourself in perhaps a world when you engage with people who may speak a different language about that, the labeling of things, right? I feel like we're now going to be throwing labels around. So I want to like put a caveat of like the language has restrictions. And that's something that I personally have really been finding myself consciously coming up against as I try to explain and unravel and learn more about
Mhm.
unpacking all this stuff. So I just want to caveat for myself that I may say or use words that I don't necessarily mean because I don't necessarily have the formatted thought through it. So I'm going to work through it. Anyway,
Yeah.
with that, how do you find that you navigate for yourself talking to others who may not have that same vocabulary around all the different interdisciplinary hats, for lack of a better term,
Mm.
that you use, and being able to engage in a dialogue that doesn't feel restrictive?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm still navigating what that space looks like, but the through line of it for me is that I always can only speak my own truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I'm engaging in these conversations, and if someone's like, oh, so you're an actor, and I'm like, well, actually I do perform, but I also, right? So it's just like, how can you plug your own self and your own talents and skills and interests in whatever conversation you're having? Because you never know, like, that's the crazy thing about networking, as my little sidebar, like, you never know who knows somebody else. And like, if folks can see your truth and like understand from your mouth what you're interested in and what you're trying to do, they're much more likely to be able to like plug you to their friend, or
Yeah.
you know, make those connections, assist in making connections. So I kind of just tell people who I am, and if I think that they've got it wrong, I'm like, well, let me reintroduce myself, or you know, clarify.
Yeah. How did you learn to feel confident to do that?
Oh,
But I mean, maybe that's a really like invasive, let's talk to your therapist kind of question, but like,
I don't even know if it's invasive, but no, it is a deeper one. Like, it has really been a long, long, long journey for me of like navigating self-esteem issues and like imposter syndrome, as previously named, you know, that before we had a word for it.
yeah.
And I don't know, I kind of got to this place where I've been through so many things in life at the whim of other people's categories of me, or trying to assimilate or fit into what I'd been told I'm supposed to do, and found myself not living in my full true self. And I like, you can, it's hard to know when you're in your true self, except that like you don't feel discomfort. Oh, this is really hard to talk about. I don't know. Yeah, I've gone through so much that detracted from who I was, that eventually I was just like, okay, well, let me try it this other way. I don't have to move through space in this way anymore, especially if it's not serving me. And I know it's not serving me because I can feel it in my body. Like, even if there's no like, I wish there were a banner that was like, you're on the wrong path, or like, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. But like, you can feel it as like some kind of cognitive dissonance in your body. At least for me, that's how it's manifested. Like when I get like, I don't know, the hairs on the back of my neck raised because someone has called me something that I don't identify by, or whatever. And so I just started like speaking out on it. And also, I as a person have always kind of operated in truth, like to a fault. I will often put my foot in my mouth because I'm being over honest, or
I think that's why I gravitate towards you, because I do the same. Very much so. That I'm known to do. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I see yep, I get it.
Yes.
I get it.
And so that's been something I've had to learn how to navigate, where I'm like, okay, how you can tell the truth, but like pick and choose when and where you're dropping it. That way you're not like trying to like, yeah. So when I started like actually leaning into speaking when I felt compelled to speak, as opposed to squashing down that instinct, I was able to begin this journey of like, okay, I'm just going to tell my truth. And like, sometimes it doesn't happen with confidence. Sometimes it's just like out of need, because like at the end of the day too, as an individual, want to be understood. I love clarity. And so I often over explain, because I'm trying to get out every version of the words that can like get everyone back to the same place or understanding.
Yeah. No, thank you for navigating that exploration here with me. I know it was kind of like a deeper question that perhaps both of us didn't anticipate we'd get to so quickly.
Fine, though. You know me. I'm like, let's go deep. That's what I really want.
I love it. I love it so much. I mean, this is a conversation, the imposter syndrome label, which, as you said too, like we hadn't had really the vocabulary around that for so long, or at least from my adolescence. I don't remember being like, I am an imposter syndrome feeling person now. Like, it's not like I knew what to call it. You just felt that you didn't belong, or that somehow you weren't worthy enough of being in that space. But with the language around it now, I feel like it has become some form of healthy, but also perhaps buzzword of an excuse to like be like, well, this is it, and I don't have to necessarily take action. I guess with the artists that we've had thus far through our EAC cohorts, and I would imagine those who are listening who are newer to our community, it's something that most human beings feel, but perhaps because the arts spaces feel so specific and gated in many capacities that
Mhm.
so often perhaps we find ourselves in that feeling more than others may, just because there's so many different spaces we're trying to occupy.
Yeah.
I guess I would love to have the conversation about imposter syndrome while we're here, because why not? But also, I think there's something about naming it that we allow ourselves to find commonality in it, which
Mm,
is the complete antithesis of what the whole concept is anyway, right? It's like, well, I am the imposter, therefore I am the one who is not supposed to be in said, let's call it a space, said space.
yeah.
Whereas recognizing like, oh no, we are all feeling some form of that within our own selves, and therefore there's actually a collective understanding around it, which could bring us together in some way. I don't know what I'm getting at, but that's been on my mind about imposter syndrome lately,
Hmm.
how it's made us feel isolated when it actually could be a connector.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an interesting thought. And I think you're right, or at least that I agree.
Mhm.
Um, what I think ends up happening too is like as quote unquote imposters or, as individuals faced with something that may cause you to feel like an imposter, because first and foremost, you are never actually the
Yep.
imposter. Like
Uh-huh.
you might encounter things that cause that feeling within you, but like you yourself are like a whole and beautiful individual,
Mhm.
period. um it's part of the human experience where we feel like we're the only ones going through something, and so we don't talk about it. And so
Mhm.
as things become shrouded in like silos or just inner thoughts, I think it kind of cuts off our ability to build community around it. So like I really agree. And I think that's maybe part of the reason why we have lost out on that opportunity to build a community around the fact that we're all mutually feeling some type of version of this thing. And how
Mhm.
could we like support or help each other through it? And so by talking about it, like we're
Yeah.
doing on the Empowered Artist Collective podcast, we can help demystify some of that and also just like bridge the gaps and build some, I don't know, the beginnings of connection,
Yeah.
or spark the thought that people can connect around it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I I mean, I'm not going to say that this was like the reason EAC started, but it definitely was a huge part of it, where the feeling of being in a silo or an
Mhm.
isolation, obviously compounded by a pandemic, was something that so many of us retreated into our own spaces to try to cope, which is healthy to like learn about oneself and reflect and recognize what is necessary and important.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, we are a socialized being as humans, and there is something about being able to observe in others and then learn for ourselves what is
Mhm.
necessary for us to exist. um I just think it's such an interesting topic that obviously we're not going to like solve anything, but I think even just putting it into the universe is, it actually has potential of bringing people together when you talk about it,
Yeah.
is perhaps a different an entrance way of acknowledging that it isn't something that, as you so beautifully said, it's not something that's assigned. We put it on ourselves despite the fact that we are these gorgeous whole people, however we are in that moment.
Mm.
And it's something that in many respects we have the ability to um, change when and if we enter into a space. And it's like, okay, well, today I may be feeling this way, which is an accurate and honest thing. And I acknowledge it and I'm with it and I'm here with it and I'm holding its hand. And I imagine every other person in this room also has some version of that for themselves in some way. And therefore, perhaps it's a way for me to enter more whole,
Mm.
not wholly as in like an H, but like whole personly.
Yeah. Or with freedom,
Yeah.
perhaps, like for exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. There's something that you said about us putting it on ourselves. And I think there's like a little bit of truth to that. But I also think that like it's born out of like the ways that we as a people, particularly like you Americans from the United States, have been like indoctrinated
Mm,
to, like the ways in which we're taught to think about ourselves or our place in the world based on like societal standards,
yeah.
or the system of capitalism like playing
Yeah.
into interpersonal relationships. So I think it's a natural thing to see a example of like the way that something is supposed to be. I'm doing lots of air quotes for those listening. As in like, these are the things we're seeing in media, or this is what I'm hearing from legislature. Like this is quote unquote right, as
Mhm.
opposed to like, those are some people's ideals. And like, I don't necessarily have to agree with those
Yeah.
too. So I think I've spent a lot of time, just to circle back to that question of like, how did I build the confidence?
Mhm.
Um, I think I've spent a lot of time in my 20s to now, exploring what beliefs I hold in my physical being. Like, what was I taught?
Mhm.
What of that do I actually agree with? What
Yeah.
serves me? And then if I, and then continuing to seek out new education on like different ways to look at and interact with the world and my place in it, which I
Mm.
think has really given me a lot of the freedom to be like, wow, I was really trying to operate within these bounds, and yet it only, caught a little part of the Venn diagram of who I am.
Yeah.
Um, and so all that to say, like, yeah, like there is some of that, like, oh, I was raised to think this way, so I can't show up in the X way. Um, so I must be an imposter that I can put on myself. But like, it definitely comes from somewhere, I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
outside of us. I think if we were to raise a generation of little humans and like be like, you can do anything, like, and people used to tell us that, but then growing up, you could be an astronaut, you could do
Yes.
whatever you want, and like you can, but like there are also I don't know, situations from people's social locations, where they were born, their religion,
Yeah.
their family's financial standing, race, gender, or the lack thereof, that like
Mhm.
really kind of put people into these different starting places on this like journey to self-discovery, and also the
Yeah.
journey to like equity in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. I think I've talked about this before with friends about, which is better or worse. There's clearly, a lot of things that are better or worse in everything. But back in the day, if your family made shoes and your
Mm-hmm.
grandfather and your great grandfather and your great great all made shoes, then fell into I will be a shoemaker. And you
Yes.
did that well. And there was something I would imagine about that time where you would become the best shoemaker ever because you didn't have all the options of all of the things
Mm-hmm.
that one can do. It's like, this is the thing you will do and you'll do it great. And you then leave this earth knowing you were really, really good at something. You were. And yet the flip side is when we're taught young, you can do anything and be anything. And yet you don't necessarily have the resources or the accessibility or the community or the all of the labeling that one needs to have access to all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
um it it becomes this like nebulous phrase that actually isn't grounded in something, so that there's all this potential in theory choice of I could be and do all the things, and yet where does one begin, or where
Yeah.
does one start, or how do you decide that this is actually the thing when you always know that perhaps the grass is greener because you've been taught that you can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so curious to see the ramifications of that um offering, which is what it was meant to be, which is you can
Mm-hmm.
do it all. But for our generation, and I've seen it for myself, I've seen it for my friends, I've seen it for others, of the possibilities really do seem endless. And so this idea of quote unquote settling for something, which it's not, but this idea of settling on something makes us feel
Mm-hmm.
like we've limited our potential.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I guess that like leads me to another thought of success.
Yeah.
I know we're talking so lofty. I guess I'm in a mood. But this idea of success, right? And how, as we're finding these things that perhaps exploring and finding these things that we perhaps want to use as exploration for our own artistry or human selves, we are taught and told outside of us that there is a sphere through which success is on a barometer, and
Mm,
then it also comes up against our own, right? Which I think maybe is mirrored in the same, you can do anything.
yeah, yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering, first and foremost, how do you define success? And then let's go from there.
Yes. Before I define my
Yeah.
idea of success, I'm so grateful that you asked that question because I do absolutely think that it is an individual thing. Like
Yes.
every individual has to define success for themselves. And I think that's how you end up on your path to figuring out like what brings you joy, what makes you happy, what you'll be most successful at doing as a vocation is because you desire to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, for myself, I think I define success as, oh my gosh, peace. Like
Mm.
peace first and foremost. I've been had a long journey in my short number of years on this earth, and I think that peace is something that I strive for, and it's like something that I'm also continually reaching toward, as opposed to like a place that I can get and sit and then it's done, it's set down.
Mm.
I achieved the thing. Um, it's cool as a motivator also because it keeps me constantly evaluating the spaces that I am in by myself in my brain, but also the spaces I put myself in, whether that
Mm-hmm.
be personally or artistically. Um, so peace, gosh, success for me looks like community. It looks like building relationships with other folks and being able to support and uphold, offer a foothold, offer, I don't know, just even these lofty conversations from inside of my brain that might be able to help somebody else look at the world differently. Um, and honestly, eventually, success will include my like beachside house.
Yes. Yes.
You could be my
Manifest that.
leader.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Do you have a
Yeah.
specific beach in mind?
Not quite yet, but I did just go on a trip to Cozumel and experience the Caribbean Sea for the first time, and I'm obsessed and like I'm probably moving to Mexico at some point.
Great. We love. We love. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know how to manifest the way that I feel like so many of my friends do, and I'm
Yeah.
honestly envious of the way in which they manifest so deeply because I watch it happen, and it's like, well, this is something I in theory could do, but I don't think I have that spiritual connection just yet. I have to work on
Mm.
it. But the more specific they get, truly the manifestations happen. I've
Yeah,
I've been a converted manifester, idealist. I don't know what the phrasing is, but
for
like
sure.
it's really kind of wild. So yeah, build that house in your mind and like
Thank you.
I'll,
Yeah,
I'll
I can see it. It has a huge soaking bathtub, like an onsen. Like,
Ooh, does it have
can't wait.
feet or is it like in the
Oh no,
ground?
I think it's a standalone tub that like is it doesn't have feet and it's flush on the ground, but it stands alone in like the middle of a very large like bathroom space with like sunlights and lots of
Ooh,
air and windows and just lots of like nature access.
yeah. Like beach view through the bathroom, or are we talking like tree
No.
view?
I think beach view through the bathroom so that as I'm sitting in my tub, I can also be like, I'm in the ocean right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is the specificity that we need, I
Yes.
think.
Thank you for asking these questions
You're
too, fleshing out
welcome.
my manifestations.
Any way I can for others.
Yeah. For others. No,
Yeah. I'm
let's
like,
manifest for Jennifer.
great. I mean, we'll get there maybe one day.
Yeah,
But
okay.
like, I'm just picturing now you have like a gorgeous vanity and there's like, like really clean windows. I don't know. I'm now making up my own manifestation and your manifestations.
Yes.
That's
Well,
not
now
actually what's happening.
we're building the foundation of yours. Yes.
Listen, I'm more of a mountain gal. Like I
Yes.
don't need the water. I need like cascading hills and
Yes.
trees and brush and the smell of woods and tree top, like birds at the top, so you
Yeah.
you sense the distance of space and
Yeah.
you feel small, but it feels expansive. And anyway, I can maybe I'll do an episode about mountains because it's clearly a deep love.
Yes. No, I love this. Oh my God. Wait, do you mind if I turn the question around on you? Like,
Sure.
what is your definition, your personal definition of success?
I don't know if I feel like it's an ever evolving definition.
That too,
And
yes.
it's an ever evolving exploration because a lot of it, I think, for me, is unpacking the expectations of success
Mm,
that
mm,
I think I inherited and was taught,
absolutely.
that some of which I still want, frankly, of these loftier, if we're talking career or interpersonal relationships, some of these things and ideals that I think I do want, but the way in which the ideals of success were taught and told to me are things that
Hmm.
I'm trying to unravel, and being open to perhaps the journey that it might take for me to quote unquote reach them.
Yeah.
So I guess my version of success is maybe similar to yours. It's more like freedom, I think, to explore.
Yes.
I think there is an ownership that I want with the word success to me and the way in which I relate to the world around me,
Hmm.
and how I can freely find myself and explore in those parameters to reach those other things. I'm using a lot
Hmm.
of hand gestures for those listening, clearly, because that's how I think through my own thoughts. But yeah, I think I know that's also nebulous, but it's this knowing that nothing is permanent,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
that I am a human being who is flawed and beautiful, and that is what makes me me. And as I continue to grow and expand and explore, I have the ability to try all of the things to nebulously reach these quote unquote ideals that on
Hmm.
the way I might realize are actually not for me. And that is success, as
Yes.
opposed to I am on the goal, I'm on the trek, and I must go meet the thing, and then missing out on all of the life stuff on the
Hmm.
way. So maybe it's just the marriage of living with the freedom of doing so as I try to expand towards these beautiful, lofty dreams that were taught and told and also became something that I wanted, but
Hmm.
re-examining how,
Yes. Yes.
I think. For now,
Hmm.
that's my current
Exactly.
definition.
I love that. For now, just to circle back to something we said previously, like as we as individuals are able to show up new every day, as in like, this is who I am today.
Yeah.
This is what I'm interested in talking about or navigating, interested in learning about, and interested in working on. I think that your definition of success can also shift and change
Yeah.
as you learn more about yourself, about the world. I mean, oh my goodness, I feel like I learned so much about myself and how I personally would prefer to operate like through, I mean, the shutdown of the past 2 years,
Yeah.
through the panini, as I not so lovingly call it, because a Hemi pressed is what it is.
I live. I have not heard that one, and I am here.
It's ridiculous. But
Oh my
like
god, I love it.
honestly though, like I feel like before 2020, I definitely was on the track where I'm like, okay, I'm making my way up through the arts. I'm figuring out what angle or proximity to the art I desire. So, and was using that to like inform my choices, career path choices on my journey to quote unquote success. But it definitely was like in hourly or salary jobs. I'm
Yeah.
working 9 to 5. Well, until you're in theater and then you're working. You're working.
Conceptually. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. In
Monday to
theory. In theory. On
exactly.
paper.
But just like keeping a very regular schedule and like at the whim of some other organizations or larger entities needs, and found that like, oh, hold up, wait,
Yeah.
like I have these skill sets. I don't necessarily enjoy operating at like 175% all of the
Mhm.
time. Um, and I don't have to be I don't know, like, I don't have to, like, be renting an apartment in a really expensive city
Yeah.
to work at a job that, like, if I quit right now, I wouldn't be able to afford this apartment. Like, how are
Mhm.
we able to oh, yeah, so I guess that's another facet of my definition of success is, like, being able to, like, support my means, support myself with my means, but, like, without that being, like, a ridiculous
Yeah.
amount of cost, like,
Yeah.
financially. So I've been like, "Oh, you know what? If I have Wi-Fi, I could be anywhere. I could have my own tiny home. I
Yep.
could live in a different country and get flown wherever I need to go because, like,
Mhm.
the world is actually so much bigger than I think we're often allowed in our, like, white collar 9 to 5, that mystified story of success or
Yeah.
example of success that we have been taught to aspire to. I think most of us in our generation. Um, but like, oh, actually, I really can break that mold and I don't have to operate in that way. And that's literally why I like left my job and started freelancing and,
Yeah.
have been, knock on wood, have been blessed to, be working consistently since then. Um, but it definitely was like, okay, on a leap of faith, like
Yeah.
I'm going to really strive toward my version of success. And I don't quite know what that path looks like, but I know that I have these skills and I have this network and like community. And how do we continue to build together?
Yeah.
I mean, like for my own personal artistic dreams or goals, but also like for the betterment of the world as a whole,
Yeah.
which is my lofty Pisces
Yeah, I
ideal.
love it. I think by you taking that leap of faith, you make space for other people who have a similar life stance to reach out and find you, right? Because
Yeah.
you are living in the things that matter and the truth of that for yourself, right? And
Mhm.
there really is there have clearly been ups and downs of these past 2 years, and I'm literally talking to you in a really rundown, disgusting dump of a spot, but it's in Vermont. I did this last year too in a different, much better spot, where I otherwise would never have been. But trying
Mhm.
to marry my like life feelings of being in said mountains,
Yes.
accessibility to that air and the nature and the skiing and all of that for me as a human to then be able to show up for my artistry and figure and recognize that it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen, the big
Yes.
quotes, um, and the trust in oneself to
Mhm.
know that if you've put the groundwork for you to be flexible in the ways in which the world is calling and then you want to answer towards, it will work itself out. Going back to manifesting, like I really, the older I get, or the with the past couple of years specifically, I really do
Mhm.
believe that what is meant for you will find you. And I feel
Absolutely.
like you are a living example of that, where you've now done like 360 of ending up where you were, but in a totally different way that is more in alignment with where you are right now as an artist and the
Yeah.
goals in which you're thinking. And how cool that an institution, an organization that you were a part of is now seeing you and recognizing you for your growth and being like, we still love you as a human being. Let's have you here
Mhm.
in this capacity,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. I thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I
It's
feel
still like,
it.
it's hard like when you're in the midst of it to really like take those steps back and see the optics of like, wow, look at my journey from like there to here and look at what I've learned or how I've grown and how things have changed. So it's just really nice to like have other eyes on it that can reflect it back,
Yeah.
which is why community is so freaking important because they like
Yeah.
remind you of like where you were so that you can be like, great, this is where I am and like how do we marry that. But yeah, no, I honestly, you're so right because I'm like, I don't quite know how these opportunities, like, I don't know how I end up where I end up. I just like push toward the thing that feels right in the moment that I feel drawn to do. Um, After lots of agonizing thought
Yeah.
behind it. But yeah, I really do feel like we each have a path and like what is for you is for you. And like, we make choices that set us like different forks in the road on like the path of life that we have options of, blah, blah, blah. As I get loftier, God forbid.
Look, this
Um,
conversation, it's lofty as they come.
this is the stuff I think about all the time
Same.
too. So it's fine.
Same.
Okay,
No, it's
great.
great. That's why I'm so grateful to be here. And if anybody's listening, you're welcome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're welcome. Um, But yeah, no, I really do feel like we all have the path that's laid out. And like, I feel like we end up where we're supposed to be, like, which can suck sometimes too. Like, it's not always
Yeah.
like sunshine and rainbows and whatever. But like, I think that there are learnings along the way. There are connections along the way. There are like chance encounters that inform future opportunities too. If you are able to tap into what feels right for yourself and then follow that path and the choices and decisions you're making, and
Yeah.
the ability to like evaluate that when a new fork comes up, I think is like probably the most helpful thing, and is like not something that I think we had the opportunity to do as far as like with the luxury of time
Mm,
to have that type of introspection before the pandemic. I
yeah.
don't think that I would be where I am now had that not happened.
Yeah.
Um,
How are you holding on to the ability to keep time for that reflection if things are kind of
mm,
trying to get back into what I would call like capitalistic structures?
for sure, they really are. I came revving back. I really
Oh,
thought we
oh
had a
no.
reckoning.
No, we were on the fast train. The train had been waiting. It wasn't even in the wings. It was waiting on the track, and it was like, oh, the track is kind of open. We are storming through. So no, the train
Exactly.
it happened. It's
Oh
been
my
flying by.
gosh. I
Yeah,
honestly, it's what pushed us back to come back so soon.
I
Like, let's
know.
be
I
honest.
know.
Um, yeah, I think that's something I'm still navigating as I'm like newly confronted with it. I do think that being a freelancer has been really helpful in like, oh yeah, I might have time between contracts, or I get to choose when and where I'm seeking out work. And I
Mhm.
mean, that sounds really freaking like privileged elitist because like I don't, it's not a given that there will just be things out here waiting for you, but like there
Sure.
are so many job opportunities and so much remote work happening now too.
Mhm.
That it's like, yeah, if you decide that whatever you're doing right now isn't working for you, you can seek out something new that maybe can offer you some more time. Um, but yeah, so like I've bounced from contract to contract, but had a little time in between here and there. Um, to just like sit down and be like, okay, like, is this what I want to do? Is this where I'm going next? But I will say too, like my current goal is like I'm kind of at the whim of the work.
Mm,
I only will agree to do work that I feel called to do, or like is I'll learn something from, or is furthering my hopes about how we could move, I don't know, the human race, mankind
yeah.
forward. And so as I follow that work, I kind of am at the whim of like, great, so now I'm going to be in this city and I'm going to be here. And so I don't know that I've reached the point yet where I have to look at and evaluate the structure that I'm in right now on this like quote unquote journey to success, or my version of it. Uh, yeah, I don't know that I've gotten there yet to be like, great,
Mhm.
so what now? Because
Mhm.
I'm kind of my own boss, like,
Yeah.
which is like a new thing too, because then I now have the responsibilities of keeping myself on task and making sure I'm not excited to file taxes. Boy, will I tell you.
Yo, it's not a joke. I mean, we don't need to get into taxes because that's
No,
just the
we
most
don't.
boring. But like, yo, there's a like this year specifically, I understood why I have an accountant, and I'm
Mm,
grateful to pay them to not have to do the things as a freelancer myself.
yeah.
With, I mean, the amount of W-2s and 1099s that I have is I actually don't. I'm impressed actually about it in a very scary, not okay way.
No, be impressed about the work, especially if your accountant got you.
Oh my, I
Funny.
mean, they got me, but it's like, a price here.
Yeah,
Like this
well,
isn't
sure.
nothing's free. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. All this hard freelancing work is coming, it comes back to you and you're like, well, that
Mhm.
would have been nice if I had a single employer who was like, here is the thing, and you have some health and benefits and, a retirement
Exactly.
fund. And you're like, well,
Right.
I guess that's the trade-off.
Yep.
Do you believe in regret? I ask
Mm.
that because as I was hearing you talk and reflecting for myself about, as artists, freelancers specifically, who don't have a specific path, and therefore all of the paths are possibilities, which is a gorgeous freedom and also a scary thing. So when you make a decision, is
Mhm.
it the quote unquote right decision, as opposed to like it's just a decision and you can make a new one? But
Yeah.
Are you somebody who looks back on your life choices and says, I wish I did this? Or are you somebody that's like, this has taught me this and led me here, and there's some form of acceptance through all of the decision making, and therefore the trust that no matter what you decide, you have chosen that, and that is like an autonomous thing that you've given to yourself no matter how it plays out?
Sure. I think a little bit of both, actually. I think I lean a little bit more toward the second. I hold a couple of philosophies that I've just like made up in my brain. One of which being like, you're on a life path. These choices are forks in the road, and like it takes you down whatever. But like the path of your life isn't one singular line. Like it's, I don't know, like veins or something, like a system where like there are many possible outcomes, and it's based on the choices that you're making. But I also believe, another philosophy of mine, that like you are exactly where you're supposed to be in any given moment because you're there.
Yeah.
Like you and I are here talking about this because we're supposed to be, and whoever's listening to this, it's because you're supposed to be, and there's something for you here, whether it's a learning or something positive or sometimes something negative too, which like I don't wish on anyone, but like it happens. Or sometimes we make, I don't think there are right or wrong choices. I just think there are like better or worse choices. That's a phrase that one of my mentors, who has passed on, Reggie Ray, shout outs, used to say. He would be like, yeah, there's not right or wrong, there's better or worse, and like you make a choice and then you have to live with the ramifications of that until there's another shift. So there are some choices that I made, I mean, I'm human, like that I wish I hadn't, or like I wonder what if sometimes, but I don't ever think I've been like I would take it back. Because it's like the formation of how I got to the person I am now, who is like on this journey of like falling in love with themselves and figuring out what they're striving toward. And I feel like all those wrong choices were like, or not wrong choices, excuse me, like not as beneficial choices, helped the scaffolding too. Like you have to, it's like bumper cars. Like you have to hit a wall sometimes to know that like that's not the lane you're supposed to be on, or like to allow you to change your course, like some redirection happening too. And so it's like, yeah, if this bad thing hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have met this person. Or if this bad thing hadn't happened, I wouldn't have known that's not what I wanted, or not what I needed, and that I needed to make a change. Now, do I think that it ends up positive at the end of the day for every person? Not necessarily, no. Because like there are still choices to be made, and like, are we listening to the learnings? Are we like internalizing those and using them to inform our way forward? Or, doing the adverse. And so like, yeah, I don't fault anybody like for where they end up, but like it is up to us as the individual. And I think that's one of the major things that I've been learning in my adulthood. And as I'm like, navigating the world on my own, which I've done for a long time, but like, I feel like as you get some years, you gain a little more perspective too.
No, I hear what you're saying. And I think I was listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, as I am ought to do on a weekly basis. And one of the recent episodes was about regret, and how the definition of regret versus like remorse versus, just like different, again, language, but how it kind of perhaps impacts our choices because we hold on to the feeling of regret rather than just simply like acknowledging. This isn't necessarily what they talk about, but this is, I guess, my addition to the thoughts of like, if you can acknowledge, I wish this were different, or I wonder what would have happened. And then that is what it is. It doesn't become its own thing that takes on its own identity of, well, then if I hadn't done this, and then we can build so gorgeously beautiful stories in our brains that then we are actually not living presently. We're living in the what ifs or the regret land. So I think I love your mentor's advice. And I also, for me, I feel like I want to take it a step further of like, it's not even better or worse, because even that's subjective.
Yeah, it is.
Like what's better or worse for me is perhaps completely the opposite for you.
Exactly.
Arguably, and So, especially when I coach material, I always ask, like, how did that feel? I don't say, like, was
Mhm.
that better or was that good? Because
Yeah.
who cares? And B, it's completely irrelevant because your opinion is different than my opinion, which is different than their opinion. And also that doesn't matter either. How did that feel
Mhm.
for you?
Mhm.
Right. And so, I guess hearing that, I appreciate the, like, is it better or worse? And I guess I want to also offer, like, are you able to live with it?
Mm.
Like, are you able to, where does it sit in your body? If it's spiraling up in your brain a bit, then that is something that maybe needs to be worked out. Or if it's sitting in your pit of your stomach, then how can we move it? Is it sitting in
Mhm.
your heart? And all of those things would affect the way in which you presently live in a
Yeah.
different way, and offering that there's movement around those feelings, recognizing that perhaps it won't go away ever,
Mhm.
but that it can be incorporated in your physical body and mind and heart and spirit and emotional life in different ways so that you
Yeah.
don't harbor on it in some way.
Ooh, I love that. I mean, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. Because I will say, like, as a person who like is on this journey and growing and whatever, like there may not be like many things that I like quote unquote regret that I would take back because they have been
Yeah.
integral in like me getting to where I am today.
Yeah.
But I do still in this, I mean, shit, we talk about with our therapist, right? Like harbor some sense of shame
Yeah.
about moments in my past that I am learning in the process of navigating,
Yeah.
I suppose. And I think that's so powerful about like one, like what you were saying, Jennifer, about like where and how does that live in your body and like can you live with it as like, I don't know, an evaluator thought when making choices, when making
Yeah.
decisions. Granted, you don't quite know what the outcome of the choice is going to be, but great. I mean, when do we ever?
Yeah. Literally. Yeah.
um, but also, yeah, like being able to evaluate that and checking in with yourself and your physical being.
Mhm.
Um, oh, I don't know. I'm like, I wish somebody had said this to me 20 years ago. So I could be like,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any of the answers to it either. And I also
yeah,
wish that this was said to me 20 years ago. And that's a huge reason why I'm having these conversations now.
yeah,
If even a single person listens to it, or even if just the two of us sit here kikiing and nobody else
yeah.
does, like, I think it's really important that we reflect. And again, I'm super cerebral in that way, but that we reflect on the way in which our life choices are exactly that. They're life choices, and they're not good or bad, they just are.
Yeah.
And then we have the choice of how we want to feel about it, and then what we perhaps want to do about it, if anything.
Mm,
But all of that is yours. It is your choice.
exactly.
Hopefully, granted, there's obviously other things, but hopefully, when push comes to shove, it's yours. And,
Yes.
perhaps like taking back the ownership over that too, of like, so many of these things, if we're talking in the land of regret or looking back, it's like these things perhaps happened to you, even though you were the thread through which you experienced them. So you were
Mhm.
there, but we can often, blame or whatever, all the other things. They did it to us, but we were there. And so then how can we choose to move forward with that?
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. I think it goes back to, all these lofty things, but it goes back to the imposter syndrome aspect about it, of coming in, which is also related to what you were talking about with shame. Like, it's all
Mm,
correlated. If I don't feel worthy in some way of being here or owning that in myself, it
mhm.
also goes back to this idea of success, right? Where it's okay, well, if this has happened to me, then how am I going to even be able to be worthy of this thing? Or if I took this different path and now it's taking me 80 steps away from what seems to be getting closer to my arbitrary quote unquote success goal, right? All of
Yeah.
those things I really do think are related back to, as we talk this through and as I'm hearing myself speak, like really related back to just autonomy of choice. And then recognizing that no matter what choice you have made, it's still
Mhm.
yours,
Absolutely
which is
that.
power, you
It really
know?
is. I was talking about this last night under the like, incoming full worm moon in
Yes.
Virgo.
Yes.
It's popping, y'all. Please look at the moon. Is absolutely that. Like, as we're moving forward and navigating life and becoming the adults who we're going to be, and like reconfiguring and evaluating like our own individual philosophies about how and why we want to make choice or decisions moving forward, that it is exactly about that. The fact that like at a certain point you have to cast off these like other naysayers or voices or things that you've been like told should be one way, and once you formulate your own opinion on it, like make your choice. Like it's your life and you are the person who's going to be navigating either the joys of that or the shame in the pit of your stomach because of the choices you're making. And so to find and step into your power, because like every individual has like their own perspective, right? Like we're all sharing, like we're all engaging the world, but like based on our own social location, individual experiences, and yeah, based on those two things and whatever else, we're seeing the world differently. Like we all have our own perception of what's happening. And some of it's, there's fact somewhere in there in our shared perceptions, but there's also like the way that you as an individual experience the world. And I was saying like how powerful, I was saying to a friend last night, how powerful is it that, yes, so there's this fact that like we're all having our own perceptions, but that also means that we all have our own individual power, because our choices and our actions are impacting not only ourselves, but others.
Yes.
And so like, how are you choosing to use your power as you navigate the earth, period? And that can be personally, that can be in the arts, like, but I think that there's some kind of like one, like a joy and a pride that you can take in that, and an ownership of that, and something restorative in that when you're feeling impostery or when you're unsure about a choice to make. Like, just know that like whatever one you make for yourself, if it feels right for you and your body, then like trust yourself. Because I feel like yourself is going to try to steer you toward the thing that you want, your definition of success, whether you know what it is at the time or not, and whether it changes or not. Hopefully it's getting you closer to where you're supposed to be. And I'm like, and who even knows what that is except for you when you get there.
Yeah. And on that gorgeous, gorgeous wrap up, I feel like that was like, couldn't have been more of a better bow. So thank you. Thank you for doing that for me. That was, oh God. Yeah. I feel like just that section alone, I'm going to go back and replay for myself whenever I'm feeling like I need a pump up about like remembering my worth and remembering my power and reminding myself that it's in me always. And it's just my whatevers that need to be like sparked to ignite it. Right. So thank you for that gorgeous little wrap up. For the listener, how within your boundaries can they find you, support the work that you're doing, reach out to you if they want to either collaborate or share whatever? Like what is the best way to find you and the work?
Well, thank you for that. I am on Instagram at the Jaz Hall. That's Jazz with one Z. I also have an email address that you're welcome to use, which is Jaz Hall, again with one Z, 19@gmail.com. Happy to be an ear, or I love mentoring, or just like talk, not even mentoring. I'm like that creates like an interesting dynamic, but like, please talk to me, y'all. I also, my artistic collective Womb, which has been on kind of hiatus as I've been like navigating shifts. We'll see how it manifests again soon, is at womb.thecreationspace. And I also just wanted to shout out a couple other organizations that I'm a part of too. Or well, rather, one organization I'm a part of and really believe in is In the Margin Collective, which is like an artistic nonprofit made up of like interdisciplinary artists, and it's community oriented. We recently produced the New American Theater Festival, which was works done by, I think, nearly all POC, new up and coming playwrights. Amazing. Directed by the same, and in conjunction, we did it with B Street Theater, which was like an amazing month-long festival of work. But in the margin is like a huge family, and it's everybody like sharing information and working together and using their multifaceted skill sets to like grow each other forward for the betterment of the world. So if you're down, check it out. It's inthemargin.org, and on IG it's inthemargin_IM. I love them dearly. Shout outs. And then another very useful, I don't know, just a useful entity that I have found is the Open Path Collective. We've touched on the topic of therapy several times during this session. And for anybody who's like struggling or, just could use some financial support in terms of accessing therapy, or, you live somewhere where you're like, I don't think there's going to be a therapist who can like speak to my specific issues. The Open Path Collective is like a group. It's a nonprofit with a group of therapists, mental health professionals, where you can get like in-person or online visits on like a really like a sliding scale. I don't think any session is more than like $60 per person after you pay like a one-time membership fee of like 50 something dollars. So yeah, and it's all like need-based, like whether it's financial need or like there's not someone who can speak to what I need to where I live, they're happy to work with you too. So just shout outs. That's where I found my most recent therapist, and she's wonderful.
I love that. Thank you for that. As you know, because you've been a part of this community, the whole point of any of this is to expand one's support system and circle of support. And I'm going to go check out those organizations as well, because they sound like my people. So I feel, I feel like this is yet another invitation to you, dear listener, to, if this is speaking to you and this feels like this is in your lane of language and whatever we're talking about, then go support the work of these individuals, and also just be curious about the ways in which they can help you, and you can help them. And it's all a mutual situation. I adore you so, so much. And I'm so grateful to you. Thank you for letting me go on philosophical thought processes today. I think I needed that, despite the fact that I had no idea. I mean, I do. I always want that, but
exactly. I'm like, also I live there, so I don't know what you're thinking me. I'm like, this is my preferred form of communication.
Same. But I guess like, when I invite somebody on a podcast and I'm like, hey, we're going to just talk philosophy today, it's like not as cute of an ask. So thank you for indulging me and going on this journey with me, and for always showing up so honestly and truthfully and authentically and vulnerably, and just leading by example in a way that I aspire to and continue hoping to develop within myself. So thank you, as per usual. This is just the beginning. I imagine I'll probably have you back in some capacity on this podcast. And also clearly within EAC programming, because you've been a part of it since its inception. So thank you for always being here.
Forevermore.
Yay. Until next time.
Until next time.